Hey beautiful mama, today I wanted to talk to you about how important oxytocin is after birth. Hopefully you've heard me speaking a lot about the role of oxytocin during the birth process, but not so many people talk about it immediately after birth, how crucial it is. And I'm specifically going to be talking about once the third stage of labour comes into play, like when the placenta is born. Because having spoken to one of my friends, I was reminded of what happened with me when I gave birth to our second son, Marley. So just to set the scene, I'd birthed Marley after 44 hours of labour and he was absolutely fine. But the midwives kind of charged into the room seconds after he was born because I'd held them back, or my mother, bless her, had held them from entering into my birth space because they had arrived just as I was about to push him out and I didn't want any interruptions. And I was a bit annoyed with them because they weren't listening to me when I kept calling them before saying I could really do with you being here. So anyway, they charged in, they took hold of my baby, and they were using the rough towel that I had actually planned would be, you know, one of the towels for the floor when I left my birthing pool and I was going to go to the sofa, you know, just to have as like a little mat to dry off on. They grabbed that towel to rub him down rather than the soft fluffy towels that I had prepared. So I was pretty pissed off and I could see them like really viciously rubbing him down because they didn't like his purple colour, which I've since learned is absolutely normal and very fine, very good. It's more concerning if your baby's a white limp colour, but purple or red is great, you know, it means the baby's got lots of oxygen and he was crying and, you know, in retrospect, there was no need for concern, but I think they were just very annoyed that they hadn't been admitted into the birth space and they were making a big deal of their role, pretty much. So anyway, they were doing all of that. And then within minutes, they were really trying to coerce me into forcibly giving birth to the placenta. Excuse me. But as anyone knows, if they know anything about birth, you can't force anything, you know. It will come when it's good and ready, and usually the placenta is birthed when you're true relaxed and the oxytocin is flowing once more. Excuse me, just need a little drink. So they had me in the bathroom and they were literally yanking on the umbilical cord, two of them, trying to force the placenta out because it had been a few minutes. And thankfully, I had my lioness as a doula there who actually, in no uncertain terms, told them to leave me alone and to bugger off. Because, well, firstly, it was the golden hour, which is the hour when you should be just bonding with your baby and you should be in complete peace and letting that oxytocin and that love between you flow. And secondly, what they were doing was really quite dangerous and could have caused a hemorrhage if they'd torn the placenta off my uterus. So thank goodness for her. So they were ushered away and then my doula said, look, I'm going to leave you alone with the baby, because obviously I was with the baby, because I demanded they give my baby back. As soon as I saw them trying to rub him with that rough towel, I just said, give my baby back right now, which they did begrudgingly. And so anyway, I had Marley to my breast and I was sat on the toilet, sort of like cowboy style, back to front, and I had a big plastic bowl in the toilet itself to catch the placenta once it was ready to fall out. And sure enough, when I was left to my own devices, the doula left, the midwives had left, my family were in the kitchen making cups of tea or whatever. Within a few minutes of peace and tranquility and just, you know, zoning into it and trying to calm myself down, I birthed the placenta, no problem, entirely, job done. No violence, no interference required. And that was that. And I thought that was it, that I had successfully birthed my baby in the placenta and all was good. But you know, having spoken to my friend the other day, something she said made me realise something. And it's really interesting how, like, you know, nearly 9 years later, I've only just figured this out because of something she's just figured out, which essentially is, once I'd birthed Marley, I loved him dearly, don't get me wrong, you know, I adored him, bloody blah, but I didn't have the same utter rush of just adoration to the point where I couldn't stop crying. With my firstborn, I couldn't stop crying on day 4, and it wasn't postnatal depression. It wasn't baby blues, you know, which can happen when the milk comes in on day 3 or 4. It was just such overwhelming joy. I didn't know what to do with it. I couldn't contain it. And I was just looking at him, every little digit we'd made, every little taste bud on his tongue, every little eyelash, you know, just thinking how and why. My God, it's a miracle, it's a miracle. And I was just heads over heels in love with him on day 4 with, you know, crazy crying. But even from the moment I'd met him after giving birth, I had that feeling of just overwhelm, and I wasn't prepared for it. I had no idea that love could be that instant and that profound upon just meeting your baby. It really shook me to the core in a good way, but also made me realize how vulnerable I was now, because I've never loved anything that much in my life. And with Marley, the second, even though I loved him dearly, I didn't have that earth-shattering feeling, which feels really bad, you know. And at the time I felt a bit like perplexed, and I thought, oh, maybe it's just because I'm used to having babies now. Maybe that just happens the one time because it's so brand new an experience to you that that's when you feel it the most powerfully. But maybe after that it doesn't have the same impact because you're kind of used to it. But I mean, it wasn't like I was a really experienced birther. He was only my second at that stage, right? And I never really made the connection until my friend said to me that because her 3rd stage of labour, her placenta being born, had been interrupted, not as rudely as mine I might add, in a very subtle way, because her midwife had questioned whether the whole placenta had indeed been born. She just said, oh, is that all of it? That spun my friend out so much, thinking that part of it may have been retained, and that meant she might have hemorrhaged and all that danger, that her oxytocin was halted and stalled temporarily, but quite aggressively, so that she never felt that bond with her baby until about 6 weeks in. And she really noticed it, because this happened with her 3rd baby, who was her first daughter. And she had just been pining for a daughter for so long that she imagined that once she'd had her daughter, she would have that same overwhelming, intoxicating feeling towards her baby, right? But she didn't. And it was a kind of anticlimax. And again, of course, she loved her, but that magic was just missing. And that magic is oxytocin. So ladies, we need to guard that oxytocin with everything we have. Our caregivers need to know to not say things that may seem innocent at the time, but that could send us off into some deep concern or worry, because we're so hypersensitive and open when we've given birth, that a comment like that, a flippant comment like "have we got it all," could make your brain go spiraling out of control. And obviously things like what happened to me, which was a much more violent, aggressive way of trying to get the placenta out of me, really impeded my oxytocin levels and caused me to feel a disconnect with my baby to a certain degree. Didn't feel like I wasn't bonded with him or I wasn't depressed, but there was something just missing. And it was the oxytocin in the power hour, or the hour of power, whatever you want to call it, because that's the first hour when you're with your baby. It should only be you with your baby, pretty much, or maybe your husband or partner for a few minutes, but really that baby should be with you, should be smelling you, should be with your pheromones, should be just totally just in your space, and no one should be interrupting that bond. Even if you've got to birth the placenta, you take your baby with you, you don't give the baby to anybody else, you don't let anyone else touch you or anything like that, because I made the same mistake with my 3rd and 4th as well, because I didn't know it was a mistake. So with my 3rd, Jessie, we had a friend at the birth and she wanted to hold him, and I, being a people pleaser and wanting to be polite, let her hold him, but not just for like a minute or two, for like 15 or 20 minutes, because she wanted to hold him, but I the whole time really wanted him back. But I didn't know how to say that without sounding a bit psycho and a bit weird, but it was obviously my maternal instincts. And he was even asleep, like he was born asleep, he didn't even realise, but maybe he did on a subliminal level, who knows, but he wasn't smelling my smells, and I obviously wanted to be smelling his smells, and I wanted to be with him for our oxytocin levels to be completely in sync and at the right levels. And it was when my lovely midwife came in, she actually said straight away, hand that baby over to the mother now. She was really firm about it, and she asked everyone to leave. And at the time I thought she's being a bit like weird and a bit strict, but I understand why now. Like, thank God for her. I felt, more bonded with Jesse, but I remember feeling extremely uncomfortable that someone else was holding him and sort of questioning myself. And then with our first daughter, our au pair at the time held our baby for a short period while I went to have my first shower, and my husband was putting our other 3 to bed. And even though it was after the hour of power, I remember coming downstairs from my shower and immediately wanting my baby, but not knowing how to reclaim her out of her arms, because she was just enamored with her and crying. She was just like, I can't believe how beautiful this is. And I was really like, can you give me my baby back, please? And I actually had to sort of cowardly use my husband. And I said, look, could you please get the baby back? I don't know how to say it, but I want the baby back. And so he said, oh, Marina, can we have the baby back? And it was no malice on her part. She thought she was doing us a favor and giving us some space. But what I'm trying to say is, if you feel that way, and you would if you'd been, giving birth in a natural way and you've got all your natural cocktail of hormones around you, it is nothing to second doubt or nothing to feel ashamed about. Claim your baby. Plenty of people can cuddle and hold your baby at a later stage, but when you're making that first initial contact, it is imperative to your bond there and forevermore that you have that wonderful oxytocin exchange going between the two of you. So there's some food for thought. If you like what you heard and you'd like to hear similar content, just subscribe to the button below, and please leave your comments. I would love to read them. Sending you lots of love.